What's up, everybody? Welcome back to ALLSMITH. Today's guest is a professional beach volleyball player. And before transitioning to beach, he had a very notable indoor volleyball career as a standout player for Stanford, where he made an NCAA championship appearance. He later moved on to playing overseas and later the U.S. national team before transitioning to beach volleyball. Today, I'm excited to unpack the story of James Shaw. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Bryce. Thanks for having me, Bryce. Yeah, it's really good to be here. Excited to chat.
Yeah, we're gonna go down the rabbit hole a little bit and learn all things James Shaw. But before we do, I had the pleasure of speaking to your wife a week or so ago, and you guys are such a cute little adventuring couple. And you guys just transitioned out to her hometown, just outside of Chicago in Naperville, Illinois. What was it like? Because you guys just posted a little thing on your social media about some fresh air and getting out into the wilderness a little bit, a little mental reset.
Totally. Yep. Yeah, that's our escape. I mean, it's tough to say that you need an escape from from beach volleyball because you're working on the beach. When you finish your practice, the office is the ocean for the most part. Um, so it's hard to say, but uh, we really love getting out on the open road, seeing a lot of nature, being in the fresh air. We've been ticking off one national park at a time, trying to see them all before we, get too old to not be able to. Um, it's been a really really joyous thing for us to just be able to go do that together and get away from volleyball because sometimes it can be stressful. Sometimes it can be stressful for our relationship too. We're both really competitive people. Um, I think when we're happiest is when we're just out there exploring and able to forget about a lot of real life quote unquote things and just go explore and not have a plan for the day. So that's the love behind that, all that stuff, and trying to find more time for that. But it's always really fun whenever we do get out there.
I love that you guys carve out time to connect with nature, and national parks light my heart on fire for sure. The
Mm,
main question for me is, as people graduate from college and they get into the rat race and they become a part of the matrix, whether that's professional sports or a big time job or simply just trying to pay the bills and make it to your pillow at night, what's the secret for you guys as far as like cognitively and mindset wise making the time to do that? Because a part of you is probably like, oh my gosh, these 3 days, like I'm not practicing volleyball. Is somebody else getting better? How do you guys kind of fit that in? And then how do you work through maybe some of the mental, like FOMO style struggles that maybe come with stepping away from the day to day grind?
that's a really good question. I think we're still to be transparent with you, we're still figuring that out. Um, there, however, sort of devil's advocate on that thought, I think the best way for us to do it is to realize that everybody has their own style and their own way of being a high level professional athlete. I think we've done a really good job together at showing each other the pluses and minuses of both. I think I've more naturally been the kind of guy who is okay stepping away for a couple weeks at a time and being super open to it. She has been more so I need to be constantly training, constantly practicing, and I used to be more that way. I think before I even became a professional volleyball player, I was obsessed. I couldn't step away. Could not think about volleyball and just my craft. And she's really that way right now, and I think it has so many positives for her, and I see a ton of positives in that um, for myself. And I think she's also starting to see my side of things where um, it's beneficial for both of us and for her and for me to be able to step away and just find that find that space, find that area where we're a little bit more away from the grind, from the bubble. We live in the South Bay in California where beach volleyball is is rampant. It's a big part of the culture, and there's a lot of the top professionals in America, they all live in that area. And so even if you're going to the store or walking the dog, you're going to see somebody, you're going to walk up next to somebody, and they're going to start talking to you about volleyball. And so it's hard to avoid when you live there in that kind of space. But yeah, I think we're learning how to try and escape from it and keep ourselves away from it at the same time as appreciating the sort of the grind aspect of it that
Hmm.
you
Also,
were
like
talking
it
about.
sounds
So
like you guys love it so much that it doesn't really feel like work until it feels like work, if that kind of makes sense. Are you guys big calendar planners where, maybe because it is easy to say like there's no off season because playing overseas and jumping into beach, jumping into indoor, like you could technically always be competing in some capacity. But it is important to understand the difference between training and competing, of course. Do you guys plan out, oh, here are certain slivers of time or gaps within the schedule where we can embody being more human and connect with nature so that way it kind of resets, recalibrates. You're almost better on the other side because of that.
yeah, that's a good point. I think we are planners. Molly has been more so than I, and I'm noticing the value in this is something that I sort of have learned along the way. Having something on the calendar that you're looking forward to outside of work, which work for us is volleyball. I mean, there's some cases where work is not necessarily just volleyball. We also have other side jobs, and so there's other things that we can get into. But um, when volleyball is the front thing on the mind, having that trip at the end of the month, um, to look forward to and be like, hey, this is going to be our chance out in the future where we're going to go out and do something completely unrelated to what we're doing. And even though we feel like in the moment it's really hard to um, wake up after a bad day of practice and go do it again, it is really helpful to just be like, okay, I see that road trip on the agenda on the future. So I think there's a lot of value for us in being planners in that way. On a daily basis, we don't necessarily plan a ton. She's more so than me, but I would say like we're pretty open to, after practice, after we've lifted, gotten our recovery in, like what does the rest of the day look like? We tend to go with the flow a little bit more, and I think that's a good sort of balance that we sort of strike as we move through our weeks and as we move through the season, which, like you said, it's not really there's no off season. Maybe there's like 3 or 4 weeks at the end of the year, sort of towards around the holidays, where it's like, we have to go, not have to, but we've decided that we're going to go stay with family and be around family, and not necessarily any possibilities to train just because it's snowing outside, or it's, there's nobody else around to practice with, or what. you know there's
NFC
certain.
is a great motivator, right? When you position yourself in the environment where there's no fucking choice,
Yeah.
you do a really good job of just surrendering to the experience, which is cool. And I
Exactly.
love the way you described like having something to look forward to, because in communicating with people that are kind of at the end of their life, or near death experiences or deathbed conversations, something that is a common thread that I've kind of pulled from those conversations is people need three things: something to do. For you, that's volleyball. Someone or something to love. That can be a dog or a significant other. In this case, it's Molly. But then it's something to look forward to. And that could be training for a certain tournament like you guys have upcoming this Thursday. Or that can be the adventure to disconnect from it all and reset, recalibrate, and recharge the mind, body, and soul. Those are three key pillars to the human experience that we've seen time and time again from high performers lean into. And it's really cool that you guys are making time for that, especially with somebody that has the resume that you have, and you've been described as incredibly talented and dynamic, especially in the transition to beach from the indoor world. But before we jump into your volleyball career, man, I'm very interested. You mentioned briefly offline this growth spurt that you had, but I've also heard you talk about the basketball and the baseball and the variety of sports that maybe you partook in as a kid. How did this development of athleticism come to be and your love of sport and this competitive nature?
I would have to give a lot of the credit to my growing up actually around Stanford. I grew up son of a coach. My dad coached uh, the women's volleyball team at Stanford for a really long time, had a lot of success, and I was really fortunate to be around high level achievers, let alone Olympic athletes, at a really young age. And I didn't necessarily realize how lucky I was until I left Stanford when I graduated. Um, how that was such a formative time in my life in developing a lot of my athleticism, but also my desire to work towards it and work for it. I understood that it wasn't just about great talent or great potential. I'd seen that in professional athletes on TV, and you can see the high performing people out there when you see them on TV and when you see them compete, live if you go see a game. But to be around it on a daily basis and how hard people work, I think that for me was the biggest sort of spur for me on into being an athletically minded guy, but also just learning how to navigate life as an athlete and trying to be a high level professional athlete.
Free is the way to be. Life beats us up a bit and causes some bumps and bruises, but that doesn't mean we have to stay on the sidelines. This is why we've partnered with Kinneon Labs. Get back to doing what you love with this incredible portable device designed to get you back in the game. Kinneon is on a mission to move people from pain to possible with their top-rated red light therapy and laser solution, which tackles inflammation along with muscle and joint pain quickly and effectively. What I love is that it's portable and rechargeable, making it easy to actually incorporate into my everyday life consistently. It's small and lightweight, so you can throw it in your gym bag or work bag or even an overnighter. Kinneon's lasers and LED combo make this cutting-edge device extremely versatile for use with general aches and pains, as well as chronic back pain, arthritis, post-surgery recovery, endometriosis, and more. This has been an amazing tool keeping my elbows and knees pain-free for pressing, pulling, and squatting in the gym. Great tools like the Move Plus give me the freedom and flexibility to continue living life on my terms without limitations. There are a lot of reasons why over 15,000 people are using this device and rating it 4.7 stars and above. Head on over to kinneon.io and use code ALLSMITH at checkout to begin your pain-free journey. Do you have any siblings that you looked up to, or like what were maybe some of the common threads that you pulled as a youngster, just kind of seeing these guys that were doing it at such a high level? And what were maybe some of the tools that you added to your toolbox?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. So I started out really a baseball and basketball guy and thought I was going to play one of those, hopefully professionally, but obviously difficult. Until my sister Jordan, she's 2 years older than me. She played. She started playing club volleyball when she was pretty young, and so I saw her sort of take that on a lot more seriously. I saw her really engage with that community. It felt like a really tight-knit community and something that wasn't quite as serious and money-driven
Yeah,
as
that's a really good
baseball
point.
and basketball. And that to me, and then I saw a little bit of the boys volleyball culture, which is even more humble and definitely not money-driven. There's just not a whole lot of boys out there that are playing. Luckily now there's a few more, but back in that time, I saw her in that community playing volleyball. It felt a little more easy going, and I gave it a try, and it felt more like home to me. So I saw her in that sport. She did really well. She went on to play D1 at St. Mary's College in Moraga, which she went to the tournament a few times. was an All-American on the beach, for their first initial years of the beach program. And so she kind of led the way for me, and showed me that there's a lot of great things to be had in volleyball. And obviously my dad being a coach was a big part of that. And so that was sort of the family tree into volleyball. But I tried to play a lot of sports as long as I could. And I think that every kid should do that. There's a lot of specialization in this. I may sound like a broken record because of all the people that are probably preaching this at the same time, but I think specialization for kids is not a good thing at all. It only really led to me just becoming more and more injured as I got through college and even at the end of my high school career. So yeah, I loved my baseball and basketball experiences. I think it informed a lot of just my athleticism in general, but also my ideas about what volleyball is, how it can grow for boys, how it sits in the sort of echelon of sports as this humble but really positive thing for a lot of boys who don't necessarily have the chance to go play or think they can go play D1 in basketball. That's a lot of the kids who ended up playing on my high school volleyball team were guys who were just not quite there on the basketball teams, and they were still really athletic, but wanted the chance to compete at a really high level in a sport that they felt like they could be good at. So
Yeah, I mean, you make so many great points there. I love the conversation around trying to mitigate specificity or specialization at a really young age. I mean, there's not just a cognitive component of different skill acquisition, but there's different planes of motion. There's understanding hip extension and shoulder flexion and overhead movement, and obviously the gamification of trying to integrate with your teammates in different ways. There's different problem solving, which then of course down the line has this beautiful artistic ability to have transferable skills into life and so many other elements. And I think that's a really important thread to pull, and a great observation as to why you're so athletic now and thinking of the sport very differently. And when it comes to former basketball guys jumping into beach volleyball, I mean, Chase Budinger has kind of made the news a little bit. I played against him a little bit in basketball growing up. He was an Arizona guy, played at the U of A, and then played in the NBA for a while, most notably with the Houston Rockets. That dude's an athletic freak, 40-plus inch vertical, and probably hitting over the majority of blocks that you're seeing in volleyball. What are your thoughts on someone relatively prestigious with the resume and notability jumping into the beach volleyball scene?
I think it's awesome. I knew way back when he was just getting into Arizona, University of Arizona, and starting to get onto the radars. Obviously, he was a McDonald's All-American, all that stuff. Like he was the real deal in basketball. And then all the volleyball guys who were aware of him, we also knew that, like, okay, you guys all know that he's also like the top recruit in volleyball, right? And so we would always try and like tell people this, and it's just really rewarding to see somebody as accomplished as him on the basketball court show a lot of the basketball guys like, hey, this is a real sport. It's a really tough sport to make it in. Speaking of volleyball, like this is a real deal sport, and boys can go do this even if they're not from Southern California, and well, he's from Southern California, but he's, he's showing a lot of the guys who and a lot of the country, honestly, who don't necessarily think of men's and boys volleyball as this sport that their son can play. It's a thing, it's a real thing. It's growing. It's something you can excel at if you thought you were, a basketball player, a baseball player. If you're an athlete, you pick up volleyball and there's an opportunity for you to go play at a high level. You're gonna have a lot of success and a lot of fun along the way, and it's gonna teach you a lot. And you might end up like Chase Budinger one day, even if you're not. Maybe if you're as athletic as him, great, a lot easier for you. But it's exciting to see him do what he's done. And I don't think he's done either. I think he because of the nature of beach volleyball, I think there's a few more years for him to be able to compete at this high level, because you can play until you're shoot. Phil Dahlhauser played in this latest Olympics in Tokyo, and I think he was like 46 or 45. So
Yeah.
um,
There's definitely something to be said about less impact in the soft sand and
yeah,
playing on a hardwood surface. And I've heard you talk about it with indoor volleyball, some of the bumps and the bruises and the scrapes and just the sheer impact of landing. Maybe somebody's foot comes underneath the net and you end up tweaking an ankle. The sheer jump is a little bit easier on the joints and the body frame when in the sand. Also diving for balls,
yeah,
despite
yep.
the sand getting anywhere and everywhere, and that being a little bit of a nuisance until you adapt and get used to it. It's definitely a sport that's a little bit more forgiving to the body.
It's man, I can't echo that enough. The amount of pain that I felt a year ago playing indoor volleyball compared to a year later now, where I'm fully in the beach. I just played a tournament, for instance. I played in two tournaments this last week. 4 matches, like tons of travel in between. There's so much opportunity for me to be feeling my joints, feeling the aches and pains like I should be feeling if I was playing indoor volleyball. And I'm feeling relatively good right now because of it. And that was, honestly, a big impetus for me to make the switch too. I've always been sort of going through long-term injuries and trying to figure out, okay, is my body just going to allow me to be a professional athlete for much longer? Some people's bodies are just kind of built the way you're just going to deal with injuries. Sometimes you have bad luck, and you might be athletic, but there's tons of instances in the past for plenty of athletes all over across all sports that have gone through this. So the I would say that one of the biggest draws for me and people like me who have come to beach volleyball feel like they can play it for a really long time. And that's why you see guys that are out there when in their 70s kind of farting around and playing with their buddies late into their 70s and 80s possibly, just because it's such a forgiving sport. It's a sport that you can play um, at a decently high level, even if your body's not in perfect shape, or not going to be super super forgiven if you were jumping and landing on hardwood otherwise.
Yeah, I like the way you described that. And the other thing that's important to note, to the human eye, it's fascinating because indoors typically 6 on 6, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
your main job is to take part of the court. You have like a zone that's kind of
mhm,
yours, and it's a specialization in that moment. But then you transition to beach, and seemingly you're in charge of 50% of the court ish. And so it's fascinating because I love to say that everything that's measured doesn't always count, and everything that counts isn't always measured. And so to the
that's
eye, you
great.
seemingly have a higher capacity in the beach and doing more work. But due to the nature of the sport and the surface that you're playing on, it's seemingly more forgiving. And that's why we're seeing people play it for a longer period of time. Plus
Right,
the cat and mouse game of indoor with that many people, it's a powerhouse game. Yeah,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
angles and a little bit of geometry and, a little bit of cat and mouse. But at the end of the day, it's like you're powering through a lot of blocks and you're trying to find those appropriate gaps within the 6-person system.
yeah,
Versus in volleyball, like you mentioned, maybe some of these 40-year-old guys or these, as you approach 50, 60, 70s, they're playing with angles. There's a touch
right,
component. There's the unique
right.
ability to use both hands as opposed to just being, a solid single side hitter and just destroying your labrums, as you talked
Right.
about when you were playing opposite there for a little while. So just to give people some context and kind of paint the picture of the journey you're embarking on now. But James, I want to hear about like your high school career a little bit and how you went through and navigated the recruiting process and then eventually ended up at the prestigious Stanford.
Yeah, shoot, that's a whole story in itself, I'm sure. But I mean, the I guess the shortened version is, I sort of narrowed my way towards volleyball. I was basketball and volleyball going into high school. I couldn't play volleyball and baseball at the same time because they're same season. So as I was doing that, I was starting to pick up a little bit more interest from having tried out for the USA High Performance Program, which is what it was called back then. Now it's sort of the U19 development program, as it's called now. That sort of came into the picture, so I felt like, okay, there's a little bit of love here. I'm maybe decently good at this sport, so I maybe start narrowing it down just to volleyball and playing club volleyball on the side. Got recruited, I would say, starting end of my sophomore year. I was reaching out to a lot of coaches. I always recommend for younger players who are trying to get recruited to just send cold emails with links to matches. Like let coaches know that you're interested, and they'll at least come watch you play, or watch the video. And that's the first way to get on people's radars. And so that's what I did. And luckily I had the name recognition of my dad. Everybody knew who my dad was. So they knew, okay, this kid, I know Don Shaw's got this kid who's playing volleyball, let's at least go watch him. And so the next, big tournaments that I had, there were tons of coaches there, at least watching. I was lucky enough to play pretty well in front of them and had some success in those tournaments. And then it all just kind of picked up from there. Meanwhile, my dad's former assistant, when he was coaching with the men's team for the last, I think, 6 years or so of his coaching career, his assistant was now the head coach, and still is the head coach, John Costi at Stanford. And he was my head coach while I was there. He knew my family. We're family friends with that family and that program. And so we knew, okay, this is where I say we as in my family, but it was really my choice. I knew that was the place I wanted to be, and obviously really difficult to get into Stanford. So I needed to bump the grades up and start that whole process of, okay, how do I get myself admitted into Stanford? But I knew on the volleyball side of things that was where I wanted to be. So academically really became like, collab with my teachers as much as I can to be like, hey, I need this certain grade in this class. I might not be at the level of everybody else in this class right now. Can I spend some extra time with you? Like a lot of the teachers at my high school were willing to do that for me, and they knew of my goals and what I wanted to go do. And I really, really, I think that was a big part in my success was having those people around me in high school that were like, okay, let's get this guy there, because he really wants it. I always tell people, I definitely was not the smartest person at Stanford, even though I think a lot of the people around me tell me that I'm, a more intelligent guy, or they just assume that I'm, because I went to Stanford that I got in there, no problem. But I truly squeaked in, like I think it was not easy for me to get in there and to stay afloat at Stanford. I think it was another thing too. I mean, you can make it what you want to make it, but as an athlete, as a student athlete at Stanford, there's another sort of level of expectation, in order to graduate, one, but in order to stay eligible too, and make sure that you're succeeding in the classroom is another thing. And so I wasn't able to just skate by necessarily. My focus was really on volleyball when I was there. And if I had sort of one regret about my Stanford career, it would be that. I think I would have taken a few more classes, or maybe gone a different direction where I actually was more interested in what I was taking. But I knew what I wanted to go do, which was to play professional volleyball. And I did what I needed to do to get to that. And I think I did it well. So no regrets there necessarily, but yeah.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level. It's cool to hear the ideation, though, about like where your headspace was at, and also just the concept of if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And so the unique ability at an early age to be like, okay, like I'm noticing some holes in my game academically. I'm going to go ask for help. And I think seemingly there is an element to the human experience where people then start to see you rather than maybe judging you as like, oh, here's this tall athletic guy just trying to seek a handout to try to go do the thing. But instead, you're willing to put in the work. You're willing to show.
That's the key. Yeah.
The above, around, under, seemingly figure out how to get to the goal. And it may look a little bit different, but I think at the end of the day, there's a huge transferable skill there, especially for high-performing masculine men. They struggle to ask for help until they absolutely hit rock bottom, or until they have stubbornly squeezed every ounce of juice out of the orange of like, this has worked for me up until now. Why would I change it? Yeah. And I think the important factor, and you went through this firsthand, of like how you get here is not how you get there. The same way you became a very prestigious setter at the University of Stanford and then had this great indoor career is not the same way you're going to make it to the Olympics in 2028 in LA in beach. And so realizing that, seeking help, and then also realizing like, oh, you're probably going to need a trainer in the weight room. You're probably going to need maybe a mindset coach on occasion. Navigating different injuries that you've experienced, you're going to need a physio or a chiropractor or an acupuncturist or an ART specialist that can help you with body work. So that way you can keep doing all the things that you love. At what point did you realize that you needed to start asking for help? And what advice would you give to other high-performing athletes that maybe are kind of on the fence about that, around like, hey, I've got this figured out, like I'm the pro?
Yeah, it's fun, dude. It's funny you say that because I think I still have a long way to go. I think a lot of, like you said, a lot of high-performing people in general, but definitely men have in asking for help. You know, there's a lot of trouble there for a lot of us, and I'm definitely one of those people who struggles with it. And I think when I did, I felt like I needed to. You know, I felt like I was sort of back up against the wall, or because this is my only goal, this is my sole focus, I need to go ask for help. One example would be I really struggled with my freshman year at Stanford. Actually, I had a really down year. I came in as one of the top couple recruits, maybe some people said the top recruit, and that sort of hung over me as a freshman. And I felt like I needed to prove all these people right. And that's a really tough place to be. And when at the end of my freshman year, we got bounced in the first year playoffs. I didn't have a good year personally. I kind of got benched here and there. You know, being one of the two setters, I was like expecting myself to be on the court at all times. And I didn't know what to do after that year. I was completely lost, a lot of depression, felt like I needed to get out of there. When this place had been my dream for my whole career, my whole life up to that point, and didn't really know where to turn, but I knew my back was up against the wall. So I needed to find something somewhere. So I started training really hard with a personal trainer, strength coach, who showed me the way really and showed me how to work. And I hunkered down for that summer and then, you know, the end of that academic year, and changed my body completely. I think that had a giant effect on how my mind was able to cope with failure. And it really ended up just driving me in a different direction, but from like, okay, this is all this external focus and all these people expect a lot of things of me. Okay, let's just forget about all that and decide this is the work that I'm going to put in, and I'm going to let that drive everything. And so when I reached out to him and saw the, basically the change in perspective there a little bit, I think things just changed for me in a lot of ways. I think it was, um, obviously the bodily change was huge for me. It was sort of like post freshman 15 sort of thing too, where I changed my body and I felt completely different on the court, but I definitely changed mentally, in that I felt a new sense of confidence that, okay, I can fail in a lot of ways, but I can also respond in this way and become, level myself up, because I know, um, at the end of the day, I can ask for help, and that I
No,
can,
totally. It's cool to hear all
I can
that,
move
man.
forward. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. It's cool to hear that, because if somebody's just reading articles about you or a resume, they don't get to see the peek behind the curtain of the struggles that you endured as a freshman. And it's not just a freshman, it's the expectations of being the son of a prestigious coach.
Right.
It's you were so focused on the academic side of things, probably at the end of your senior year of high school, just to get into your dream university and match those
Right.
expectations that maybe aligned as a launching pad for the rest of your career, that maybe your talent and your sheer athleticism and skill was so far superior to other high school athletes that it really didn't matter that much. And then you get to this place where now you're competing against the Pepperdines, the UC Irvines, and this whole West Coast fanatics of incredible athletes in West
Right.
Coast volleyball scene. And they're just as athletic as you. They're just as big as you. And the tricks of the trade weren't working anymore. And then you found
Totally.
yourself not even being the best on your team anymore. That's not just like a culture shock, but it's a confidence downgrade. You start to spiral and question your self-worth. You seemingly are like trying to figure this out with other people on your team, but you're also kind of competing with them. And you end up feeling this isolated, alone feeling as an athlete, which is so important in the development. But many people get to that
Yeah.
place and they go, this isn't for me. I'm going to
Yeah.
move on. I'm going to step away. And sometimes in the most difficult moments of your life, the best thing you can do is simply wait. Practice the art of endure,
Yeah.
and then realize, okay, what I'm doing isn't working anymore. I need to change course, because if you always do what you've always done, you'll always be what you've always been. And your goal was to upgrade and elevate your operating system so you could compete with the best in the world. And
Right.
so to make that decision, you had to go through a deep level of pain that punched you in the gut and said, James Shaw, you need to change your life. And
Yeah.
at that moment, it's easy to say that, but you actually did it. And then you changed your body, which changed your mindset. So you became the guy that does the thing that has the success. But so
Right.
many people out there believe, I have to have the resource, or I have to have the success in order to be the guy that can do the thing. And you took ownership of that. And I think that's incredibly valuable, because oftentimes athletes, especially in basketball and volleyball, I'm just not a weight room guy. It's not for me. I'm not going to do the thing. And it's not always about getting bulky or putting on 15 pounds of muscle. Sometimes about moving better, being a little bit more intentional, expression of energy in a different capacity, and the unique exploration of mindset, connecting with somebody outside of your day-to-day coaching team,
Yeah.
and maybe shifting perspective a little bit. And I love the way you describe that, man. It's very cool. And so what then took place your sophomore year and thereafter in your career at Stanford?
I mean, honestly, I also want to touch on the point of that moment where of just total lostness, being down in the dumps, when you have seen all this success coming up to this point, and you're stepping up your game to a new level, and you're feeling like, I can't compete anymore because all these guys are the same. They all look like me now. They're all just as athletic. That has happened at every level change in my career. And like you said, it happens for athletes all the time. And that that moment for me has always been like such a valuable part of my whole process. And I come back to that moment and my sophomore year and how well that went. You know, to answer your question, like that year, it didn't start out super great, but I kept at it. I kept doing what I was doing. I kept working really, really hard. I think because of all that work and that change in mindset, the flip and just being a little bit more confident than I was, um, being able to walk around a little bit more confident. We went to the Final Four that year. Made it to the national championship, and I was a sophomore setter that year. I was named an All-American. Actually, my proudest accomplishment from that year was winning the whole athletic department award for sports performance at Stanford that year. And my name's still on the wall in the weight room up there. And I think that to me is probably my proudest accomplishment from my Stanford career and maybe my athletic career, because that shows me that, and it's voted on by the strength staff in the weight room, not by, you know, volleyball people, not by my team. Like it was just based on how hard they saw me working on a daily basis. And that is the perfect lesson for, I think, for that moment, is like, yes, there's going to be that down, that really, really far down feeling that you're going to be feeling, but it's how you respond, and it's the endurance of how long you respond that is going to make that difference in whether or not you're going to succeed at what you wanted to do originally, you know. And that was what I wanted to do originally, was to be successful at that level. I hadn't thought about being professional yet. I thought about, I want to win a national championship. I want to get to the national championship. I want to be an All-American at Stanford. I want to be a Stanford great, you know. And I was on my way to doing that now because I had put in that work, changed my mindset around those things, changed my body, focused a lot more on what I needed to do to respond to that feeling. And so that's sort of how my sophomore year went, was like, I set myself up for success down the line because I was putting the work in finally, you know.
For sure, man. With you enduring that level of discomfort and adding those tools and having a relatively transformative experience from freshman to sophomore, how did you continue to develop in your junior and senior years? Like what were some of the things that you added into your repertoire? Was it watching more film? Was it understanding, you know, certain schemes and observing other teams and the angles that they're playing with? Like, how do you end up getting a leg up every year? Because it can't always be physical.
No, it wasn't physical at that point. It was, I mean, there's little tweaks you can make here and there to your body. I mean, I went through those next 2 years, to be honest, the most injuries that I've gone through in my career. I think, you know, the more you just pound and pound and pound and play volleyball year round, the more things start to just break down. It's a repetitive sport, and especially on the indoor side. And it took its toll on me, honestly. And so I did have my fair share of injuries and had to come back from those. And but I think the thing that sort of gave me a leg up in those years, I'd always been a film watcher. I'd always wanted to study the opponent a lot and study myself a lot and better myself in that way. I can't say enough about just watching practice over again, you know, to see it a second time and see if what you were thinking in that moment is the thing that actually happened. Because most of the time it's not. It's most of the time it's your perception of the reality is not actual reality. I find that to be pretty true in most cases in athletes.
I love that you said that, man. I'm such a believer that perception is not reality. And
Yeah,
like
I mean,
people just allow the eye to dictate so much, but it's like you don't know what's going on intrinsically. You don't know the intention.
totally.
And I just think that that's a very important thing to note on, because only you really know, which allows you to live a peaceful life, knowing that you did your best to become the best that you're capable of becoming, to echo
Yeah,
John Wooden's definition of success.
yeah,
And I love that you said that, man, because there's a humility that comes with dissecting, oh, that was my intention, but when I observe it on film, that's not what actually took place. And it's this paradoxical push-pull inside your mind where now you're questioning yourself, but you're also learning from the observation of the film to then like sit with that and be like, man, I was trying to do this, but it went this way.
Yeah.
How do I figure out how to improve upon that next time? So that way it's not just this repetitive cycle of making the same mistake over and over again.
There's so much value in that. And it just exponentially speeds up the process of improvement on your craft. There's no other way to put it. There's seeing yourself do it over and over again. I mean, there's the whole like audio and visual learner dichotomy, and who can learn better from hearing people tell them how to do it, or seeing people how to do it, or seeing people show you how to do it. But seeing yourself do something right or do something wrong, but most of the time it's seeing yourself do something right. That is what patterns the movement over and over again in a really quick way compared to the other ways for me.
It programs the imagery for sure.
Yeah. It becomes, I don't want to say muscle memory, because I think that has been sort of disproven by a lot of people. Muscle memory is not really a thing. You could probably speak to that more than I could, but the seeing yourself do something right and have that stick in your brain, that's such a powerful thing. And I actually, to sort of come back to your question too about sort of that junior and senior year, I had actually been asked into the national team gym after my sophomore season and at Stanford. And so that summer, and then the next summer after that, I was seeing things done really, really well at a really high level as setters. Setters on the national team, they're the highest level in the country. That's what we've got, and at the time, the setting coach was Tyler Hildebrand, and volleyball people who, are tuned into the sport, they'll know who he is. He's a really high level coach. He re-taught me how to set, and he was showing me a lot of the top setters in the world at the time, how they're forming their hands, how they're using their upper body to shape the set. This gets into the weeds a lot, but like he was reprogramming me and showing me the successful way to do things. And I hadn't had that at Stanford. I hadn't had that in high school necessarily. I was always just kind of watching myself, comparing myself to other people at my level and hoping that I was getting better. And so having that higher level, achiever showing me that way, whether it was on film or whether it was me watching practice, or being in practice with the national team, those were the things that sort of helped me grow a lot faster than I think some other guys in college who didn't have that opportunity. So I was really, really fortunate to be invited in at that time and at a young age, because I was a sponge. I was learning a lot about myself, but also just about what it's like to be a professional athlete and be a professional volleyball player.
For sure, man. Move fast and break shit. LSKD develops functional sportswear with a streetwear aesthetic that's on a mission to inspire you to chase the vibe through sport, fitness, and adventure. I train daily in the rep shorts and love the versatility they offer. The zipper pocket is an absolute game changer. I go from training at the gym directly to meetings, running errands, or prepping for podcasts. The LSKD tribe has become true family, and we are excited to continue to develop our community. Shop now at lskd.com and use code ALLSMITH. We chase the vibe here at ALLSMITH. Let's all become 1% better every day. It's interesting to pause and think a little bit. You mentioned getting into the weeds. Like, how far into the weeds do you go where it becomes subtly paralysis by analysis? Like looking at the finger pads and how they're spread, looking at the force transfer from the legs through the torso into the upper body, a low set versus pushing a set out versus a super high float set, how tight to the net, who your partner is, who's playing opposite, who's playing outside, and like understanding all the miscellaneous factors. In basketball, we call it KYP, know your personnel,
Yeah,
communicate the
yeah.
strategy with those around you, and kind of figure out how they traditionally like the set. But how is that kind of navigated with you? Like, do you guys play with like tangible hand force plates as to like the perfect ideology and like the touch of the ball? I'm just curious how you've enhanced this skill over the course of time to be one of the best in the world.
I mean, I think it's the same in most sports. It's repetition, and the more repetition you can have at a really high level, and this is especially true for setters. Most setters, and this is a lot like basketball, are just in the gym setting into a hoop over and over and over again. At the highest levels, that's how you train. Is you got a coach with you, or you got a passer and a coach, so you can see it off a live pass, and you're just repping it out over and over and over and over again. That was the MO in the national team gym. It wasn't necessarily as much at Stanford, but just because we had so many guys that we wanted to make sure everybody was kind of doing something at all times. There's bigger rosters and less coaches. And at the highest level, it's like if you're the setter, you're expected to be in before practice 30 minutes early, and you're just setting into that hoop, different locations, different speeds. For the most part, you're watching film on that rep session afterward, just to see like how it's coming out of your hands, what the ball's doing, all that stuff, shape and speed, all those things. So man, it's repetition. It's like
No, for sure. I mean,
you
you
can get
can't get
sick of
around the
it if
work.
you're yeah if you're not about that work, if you're not about that that process of okay, I'm gonna, like, this is my job, I'm going in to do it and getting a little bit better today at what I'm doing. It can get pretty old pretty quickly. So if that mindset's not right, and you're a setter, and you want to be a setter for a long time in your career, and this goes for really any craft, you better be ready for the hard part of the work, unless or otherwise you're not gonna be able to stick with it for very long.
Hmm. Going back to your time at Stanford, the world has changed a lot. We've got the nil, the name,
Mm,
image, and likeness, and people monetizing in different ways using their social media platforms, which is a tremendous asset to the likes of typically basketball and football.
right,
But it
right.
does bleed into the other sports. And I know there was a time, I've heard you speak of it before, where Stanford kind of cut their program a little bit. And I know
That's right.
you'd kind of put your foot down a little bit, and you're like, no, like you, Andrew Luck, maybe some of the other Stanford alums created a petition to then explore trying to add a little bit more support, seeking to understand the context and the monetization behind things.
Yep.
And the likes of swimming, volleyball, softball, maybe even soccer are just sports that don't get as much attention at the collegiate level in comparison to basketball and football at most universities.
Yep.
And so with that being said, and thinking about the business strategy of money in versus money out, what are your thoughts on how you guys kind of overcame that time of trying to bring the Stanford volleyball program back? Because with them being at, kind of the peak pillar in comparison to maybe some other schools, like I've heard you say before, that was just going to be a domino effect for a lot of
Yep.
collegiate volleyball programs.
Yep.
So in relation to the now with the nil and in relation to back then, what are your thoughts on the situation with high level volleyball at the collegiate level?
Yeah, I mean, that was a really formative time. COVID obviously changed a lot of things for a lot of people, and I think for Stanford, it showed people that we can't be complacent about these sports, these communities, these people that are really important to the fabric of the university and the program, and we can't just throw these things away because the money is not there. Um, and because of that, I think it galvanized a lot of people around those programs and around the sports in general that didn't want to see them die at Stanford and within the rest of the country. I think the volleyball community, um, rallied around the Stanford alumni volleyball community in a way that was dire. It was like, okay, we understand what's going to happen if Stanford cuts their volleyball program, and so we can't let that happen. And so there were so many people that rallied around our alumni group, which was a really strong collective of guys already, and the women too. Like the women's volleyball program came to our aid too, and so that community came together in such a way that really just blew my mind. It was so inspiring. It was beyond words just how impactful it was on the program, but also just going forward. Like it's been such a great structure and family brotherhood. You would truly characterize it as that. Like it's shown me, and I think it's shown a lot of the people involved, maybe not the people who are like focused on football and basketball in college, and the people who are making the decision to, disband the Pac-12 and move things around, shuffle things around, and they're okay with it because all it really affects is their bottom line. But it's shown the other people how important and how valuable and impactful coming together around these sports can be. And it brings me back to the importance of the student athlete and how great that the NIL whole process and whole reformation of the landscape has been for the student athlete. I think it's important that student athletes are now able to get paid for their likeness and their image. And yeah, it might not affect men's volleyball a whole lot just because there's not a big amount of exposure for those guys while they're at least in school. But it shows, I think to bring it all together, like that shows that college sports are still about the people and still about the sports that we hold dear to us, that are important in our lives, because not because of the money that it gathers for our university, but because of the communities that they build and the people that they bring to us. And so like the money value is easy to quantify. The other stuff is not easy to quantify. That's why all those things have happened the way they have. But I'm really, really glad that we were able to make that push together as one sort of brotherhood with a lot of supporting cast, and show people that, okay, these are things that we should still be holding in really high regard, with a lot of value in our culture, in our society. Like it's an important thing to value just those, not just the football and basketball and money makers, so that we can have a more monopolized TV system, and rather it's important to keep those sports that we love really, really highly valued in our lives.
Well, I really like the way you said that, James. It's such a pivotal part of the conversation, just because of the maneuvering and shuffling into different conferences based on the TV deals. And then when you actually peel back the layers of the onion, you see the allocation of funds going towards entertainment systems for more prevalent sports and things that are maybe seemingly irresponsible, that could potentially have monetization allocated towards other things that diversify opportunities in different sports that maybe are not as notable. And I don't know, it's a fun gamified conversation to have, because there is capitalism and there is monetization, and you need money in order to have certain sports continue to evolve, so you're not falling into the red. But I also think that there needs to be a conversation around it, because there's a lot of people out there doing really cool things that maybe don't fall into the more media covered sports that should be talked about, which is why I think podcasts are so special, and why we're here today, kind of uncovering and dusting off some of those things to give people a better understanding. Because what's really relatable? going to the beach and seeing beach volleyball and participating in
Sure,
volleyball. It's such a
sure.
low barrier to entry that, okay, maybe the skill set takes time, the athleticism takes time, but how great is it to get people out moving in different planes of motion, sand between the toes, a different change in surface. They're not wearing these seemingly casts around their feet. They're in the sun.
Yeah.
They're getting nature. From a health and wellness standpoint, you're getting all of these amazing benefits as far as like movement, but also the community component. They're not sitting at a cubicle. They're not hating their lives underneath artificial light. They're sweating. There's so much value there that I think is relatable and allows us to bleed the conversation into
Yep.
culture in general of the sport, and you transitioning from your college career to then playing overseas for a little while. And that in and of itself, huge culture shock. You're trying to elongate your career. You're trying to make some extra money. You're in a place that you don't always speak the language. You don't have family support. The living situation is different. The food is different. What was your experience like, and what countries did you play in overseas?
Yeah, so I played in. I was really fortunate enough to start out in Italy. Played in Italy for my first 2 seasons. Ended up going to Poland, south of France, and Germany as well, and then back to Italy. Another year in there. So able to play in 4 different countries and experience a little bit of everything. I really went through the gamut of living overseas. I didn't necessarily play in Asia or Brazil, some of the places that other guys play, guys and girls. Um, but I felt to me like I experienced everything I could overseas, and that's the highs and the lows. Like I really I felt the lowest of the lows being alone, feeling the monotony of the sport. I think a lot of the monotony came from playing for a paycheck instead of just playing for the fun like I used to be playing for. And you truth be told, like you lose sight of that pretty easily when you don't have your family around, your friends around, your significant others if you have them to remind you of that stuff. You don't see that stuff as often on a daily basis. You sort of have to glean it from social media and being connected on FaceTime every once in a while. And so that can drive a lot of depression, quite honestly. And you're there in the winter where you're not getting a whole lot of natural sunlight, or just even being able to go outside for any length of time. You're just really stuck in your apartment and your gym. And hopefully you're really loving volleyball enough and it's going well enough that you're fully there and fully feeling like you're doing this for those reasons that you got into it. And a lot of the time when I was over there, I didn't feel that. And that fueled a lot of decisions of, this lifestyle is not for me. And I had pretty much given up on it a few times. I had to go back home to California and feel the pang of regret of not having given everything I had to it, to realize, okay, I need to go back and give this another shot. Try to make things better for myself. Get out of my apartment more. Try and speak the languages a little bit more. My later times in Italy and this last year that I played in Germany, I really made a better effort to get out and see people more, speak the language more. That's a huge part of it. One of the first lessons I learned before going overseas was from a guy, David Lee, who multiple time Olympian. He played overseas for somewhere near 20 years, and he told a few of us young guys, like, hey, whatever you do going overseas, you have to go outside every day. You have to go out and go for walks and talk to people. That's the only way you're going to survive over there. And that's a big lesson just in general in life. Like you're going to be much happier if you're getting outside and getting out of your comfort zone. Whether or not it's going outside, sometimes it's snowing 5 feet of snow on the ground. You can't actually go outside, but if you're getting out of your comfort zone in those situations where it would be easy for you to just hunker in into your apartment for the whole day and decide, okay, I'm just going to play volleyball. I'm going to come back and eat and sit on my couch all day, and that's
What I
that.
think it really is, and you described it very well in relation to my experience in Sweden. If you want a friend, be a friend. And I
Yeah,
think what I mean when I say that, to give context, is it's really easy to go over with an egotistical mindset of, I'm an American, I'm here to do a job, and I'm going to show them how good I am so I can make money and a stepping stone and a resume builder to then go to the next best thing. And I think there is a little bit of an American mindset associated
yeah,
with that that's
totally.
not totally encompassed around connectivity and fully submerging in the human experience. We get so focused on our craft, which is why we have so many experts out here, that we lose sight of like, oh, wow, we're actually supposed to be fulfilled. We're supposed to feel
Mm,
our feet on the ground. We're supposed to try new foods. We don't need to always be in pursuit of comfort. We can go outside and just observe, wow, these are different types of trees. There's different animals here. There's different birds. There's a ton of snow. Like, these are things that fall off the wayside because you're so narrowly focused on the sport. And then the pressure that comes with being one of the few Americans over there, and that
yeah,
kind of being like massaged and ingrained into you by the coaching staff. Like, you're here for a
sure,
reason, like figure it out and
sure,
do the thing, or we're sending you home.
sure.
And I think when you sit with that, there's not many people that totally get that until you help humanize the conversation. We are all humans first before we are the identity of professional sport or whatever our job title is. And I
Right.
think there's a subtle deconstruction or movement that's taking place there, because a huge thing that stood out to me, and I'm not saying that it's better or worse because I love California, I love America, I love the competitive culture. So this is not me like putting down our American culture by any means. But something that really stands out to me is, hey man, what do you do? That
Mm,
is a big question here in America. Hey, what do you do? And then based on your answer, we're going to quantify the level of respect that we give based on trying to assign a numerical value as to how much money we think you make. And then
so
we're going to
true.
check out
Yeah.
your social media, and we're going to see if you have the blue check mark on your forehead. And then we're going to decide like what you can do for me, and then I'm going to see how I'm going to treat you accordingly. I've
Yep.
seen it time and time again, and even when I don't see it, I can feel it.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
over in Europe, I felt the question was more, how are you? How are you enjoying your experience here? Have you been to this place? Have you tried this food? Hey, what are you doing on Thursday or Friday? Let's connect and have a meal, and you can
Mm,
share with me about your experience or your family or how you got here.
mm.
And it's just an interesting compare and contrast thought exercise that I think is important for people to maybe pull away from our conversation today. Peptides. There's been a lot of buzz about peptides and what they can do for the body, skin, muscles, and health. What exactly are they? And do they live up to the hype? Your body makes peptides. They are strings of amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. Peptide therapy involves using prescription-based peptides to help treat and manage a variety of health conditions to maximize performance. Peptides consist of 2 to 50 amino acids and are made naturally in the body to act as important signaling molecules for many physiological and cellular functions. There are over 7,000 known functions of peptides in the body, and adequate levels in the body are imperative for performing at optimal levels. Discover a transformative journey to optimal well-being with Livv Peptides. Livv Peptides offer a natural and effective approach to health support. Embrace the difference. Choose Livv for a path to vitality that prioritizes quality, innovation, and your unique wellness goals. My personal favorite is BPC 157 with thymosin beta for optimizing gut health, tissue regeneration, and healing. Head over to livvnatural.com and use code ALLSMITH for 20% off peptides. That's LIVVNATURAL.com with discount code ALLSMITH for 20% off peptides.
Not echo that enough. The human connection piece is not ingrained in us by any means, at least at large. Or majority of the people in our country, yes, I would completely agree. The It's funny, one of the things that I value the most about beach volleyball, and this will sort of bring us full circle here too. One of the things that I enjoy most about beach volleyball is that human connection factor. You're in charge truly of choosing your circle, your team. In this other situation in indoor volleyball, you're not in charge of any of that stuff. You're being told where to go, who to be around, all of those things. Back home on the beach in California, especially, there's this community, but you can choose the people that you're going to be around, you're going to surround yourself with. You do have to go and train against them. And that in itself can be a lot of connection, because there's a lot of shooting the shit before and after practice, even during practice, where you're gaining a lot of that. You're out in the sun, you're out being uncomfortable, out in the elements, whatever the elements may be. Usually in Southern California, it's pretty awesome. But,
The
wherever you might be
occasional
training,
wind that's going to kind of
yeah,
screw around with your set a little bit.
That's about it. I mean, shoot, this last weekend in Denver, there was 90-degree, heat. There's altitude, there's wind. There's a little bit of rain at the end of the weekend. And then, I was in Stade, Switzerland a week and a half ago. There was a lot of rain when we were playing. There was wind. It's high altitude. It's different conditions. You're always dealing with the elements, but you're always in nature pretty much. Like you're outside, you're enjoying being outside, being a human being. I don't think we're necessarily meant to be in a fluorescent light gym that, that 6 hours a day window every day. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate most about beach volleyball, is that aspect of you're being around people that you choose to be around for the most part. You're playing a sport that is pretty niche, but also like pretty accessible, like you said, and doing something that you can do for a really long time in your life and around people who love it. And it's such a valuable thing as a sport, as an athlete. You get to this mindset of, I need to train, I need to constantly train, do the same things over and over again. But you have all those other things to add to it. If you can appreciate those things, it just opens things up. And that's been such a great thing for me, being on the beach and being able to make the transition. It just makes it a lot easier for me, honestly.
What's kind of the focal point now as you're continuing? You're about a year into your current chapter of really trying to learn the beach game, understanding the surface change. I've heard you say it before, where you can be very tall or a little bit shorter, but there's divots in the sand and almost a pretty level playing field for the most part in the sand. Yeah. And I've heard you talk about it a little bit in the sense of the timing of blocking, the angles, the ability to play off the net a little bit more and work on your passing structure, your communication strategy with your partner, the ability to understand the timing of the game in the sand. It's a little bit slower. It's a little bit of a beat, and the navigation of the elements. What's kind of the main focus for you right now, and what's the goal within your beach volleyball career?
It's actually a really interesting time for me personally. I'm going through, and by the time this episode comes out, it'll probably have been, public and all that already, but I've been going through a partnership change. So that's actually the main focus right now, is going to be like learning how to play with this new partner, learning how to navigate all the tough situations that beach volleyball players come across in the span of a tournament or the span of a season, and how we commingle in those times, and finding myself and finding things that I need to get better at within that process. That's sort of the focus right now, is like, I know that even a year in, like, it feels like a long time, or maybe it feels like a short time to some people, but I feel really young in this sport, and I have so much to learn. I'm constantly asking Molly, my wife, who has played in it for about 10 years now. Like I'm constantly asking her what to do and what things I need to get better at. What does she think of that last set, that last attack? Should I have done this better? Um, I really feel green in this sport. Like really, really, like there's a lot of runway still left for me to improve to get to that point of like the end of the hockey stick where I'm starting to level out in my learning process, and now it's start to like fine tune and tweak things to get just a little bit better, just a little squeak more, able to compete at the highest level. So I still feel like there's a lot for me to learn, and that's still the focus, is like gaining that confidence, but also just finding those weaknesses and picking at them more. Because I think there's a lot of meat left on the bone there. Still at this point in my career. I know that the like long-term focus is the Olympics, but like I said, it's a week to week, season to season, tournament to tournament thing. It's not necessarily like a long-term thing in my mind yet.
It's a really smart approach, right? Like if you look too far ahead, you lose sight of the now. And I also really appreciate the white belt mentality, or the beginner's mindset that you come with. It's an interesting thought experiment, because I do think it's important to always have a childlike mindset. We talk about that often on the podcast, and like always feeling like there's room to grow. But there's also the other side of that coin, which is getting rid of this lack of confidence, knowing that you belong, mastering the mundane, and realizing that you've put in the micro actions over the course of time to have proof of concept that you are who you say you are, and overcoming just feeling good enough. And I think it takes about 9 to 15 months to get to that when you're transitioning from one sport to the next.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited because I feel like you're starting to get there a little bit, and you're starting to understand what questions to ask. Maybe in the beginning you just have to do the thing because you don't know what you don't know. And now that it's been a little bit of time, your body is pretty healthy, you're starting to play in the Hermosa Beach kind of circuit a little bit more, which in and of itself is a huge amount of respect, because it's such a invite only kind of cliquey culture from what I've heard. And once you get in, you've got that level of respect to be like, okay, I'm one of them. Let's go do the thing, and let's start turning up the dial a little bit to see how far we can take this towards your peak expression.
Yeah, man, that's so true. I'm starting to look for those questions. Exactly. I think the quality of your questions determine the quality of your life. I think that's a really powerful thing to keep in mind for me, just always. And another thought I had too was like, this is a sport that I'm in that the people who are the most successful are the people who have that highest level of confidence and that highest level of wisdom in it. They have that experience. It's a reason why most of the top players in the sport are all in their late 30s, and at least on the men's side, because there's that base level of athleticism that pretty much everybody has. The sand is sort of like a great neutralizer for a lot of that, and the elements are too. And then it just becomes a battle of who has done this more, and who has the chess game mindset down better. And that's why Molly's such a good player, is because like she's got the athleticism, she's got all of that stuff, but she's done an amazing job of becoming that great tactician, mastermind chess player. She's all about the game within the game. And that's what I'm starting to realize I have a long way to go in. There's, I've always, for lack of a better way to put it, I've always sort of coasted on my athleticism, trying to get me to where I'm going. And in this sport, it just doesn't work that way. And you have to be one of the smartest people out there to be one of the best people out there. And I'm learning that pretty quickly, especially on the World Tour. Like on the World Tour, there are a lot of guys who have played for a really long time at a really high level. And if you're not as confident as them walking on the court, there's no chance you're hanging with them. And so when I feel like I've gotten there, it'll be a different story, I think. But to get there, it's just about the time and the being out there and the intent to learn and grow.
There's always new levels, man. When you make it to the next level, it unlocks the door for the future level to come.
That's true.
This was fun, man. I appreciate you jumping on to kind of play a little mental ping pong and share a little peek behind the curtain on your story. James, where can people find you?
Yeah, man, I would agree with those thoughts. First of all, I would say thank you for having me and letting me share a little bit of my story. And if there's anything gleaned or any lesson learned, obviously the better. But people can find me just on Instagram mainly at James W. Shaw. They can also find Molly and I so we have a shared profile for a lot of the off-court pursuits that we have. Probably less often that we post on there, but when we do, we're off doing something really fun. And so that's called at Molly James Away. We have a little M&J Away brand that we've been adding to here and there, pieces to the puzzle. So yeah, mostly on Instagram. And then from there, you can kind of find everything.
That's great, man. Well, I appreciate you jumping on today and being a part of the ALLSMITH story.
Likewise, man. Appreciate it.
Guys, if you enjoyed my conversation with pro beach volleyball player James Shaw, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time, guys.